Let's see how to use TextMesh Pro. I'm gonna start by creating the objects of the scene, so if you wanna go straight to the code part, in the description I leave a timestamp. Let's start by creating the text components that we are gonna write through the script. Right-click in the hierarchy, and here we have two options. One is to create a TextMesh Pro for the canvas. You'll find this TextMesh Pro in the UI section, this one here, text-TextMesh Pro. This type of text must be attached to a canvas, so if we don't have a canvas in the scene, Unity will create one for us. And also, if it's the first time we use TextMesh Pro, we will get this window to import the tools. Click here to import. If you want, you can also import these extra assets. Once the process is finished, we can use TextMesh Pro. So here we have the text. I'm gonna center it on the screen, place it a little bit higher, and now I'm gonna create another type of TextMesh Pro that would be like a 3D model, like a cube or a sphere. Right-click in the hierarchy, and inside 3D objects, here we have this other type of text. One of the differences between these two objects is that one uses a canvas renderer and the other one uses a mesh renderer, like a 3D model. I'm gonna lower the size of the second text a little bit, set it at 20 for example. We're gonna center it and place it a little bit lower. And with this we have our scene ready. Up we have a canvas text which belongs to the user interface, and this other text is like a 3D model that we can move in world space. Now let's create a script. I'm gonna place this script in an empty GameObject, and what we want to do is inside this script we want to modify these texts through code. Let's open the script, and the first thing we are gonna do is to declare the TextMesh Pro namespace. We do that by including this instruction here in the script header. The following step is to declare the variables that we are gonna use. In our case, what we want is to modify these components. Notice this. To write a text on the screen, what I would have to do is basically modify this field here. If I manage to modify this through code, then I could show any text I want using instructions. So what we need is a couple of variables to store these components here, the TextMesh Pro component of the canvas and this other TextMesh Pro component. So we are gonna declare two variables to store those references. This would be the type of data that you need to declare, tmp_text. Here you can name it whatever you want, and I'm gonna give them the public visibility, basically because I will assign the variables in the inspector, but you can declare it as private or as serialized fields if you want. The next step would be to initialize these variables. This is something extremely important. Basically, what you have to do is to say who is stored in these fields. Notice here in the inspector that there is nothing assigned in these variables. This means that the fields are null, and if you try to use them, you will get the typical null reference exception. So, how do we initialize these fields? One of the ways to do this is to directly drag the objects that have the TextMesh Pro component to these variables. Now we have an object stored in the variable, and if you click on it, you can see that this variable is referring to this component. I do the same with the other variable, and now what I have just done is to initialize the variables, and from this moment on, I can use them through code without errors. As we said, to write the text, what we have to do is to modify this field here. This is basically a variable called text in lowercase, a variable which is inside this component. Therefore, to modify this text, what I have to do is to use the tmp_text variable, and using the dot operator, access the field text. This is the field that we want to modify. If you notice, it's a string and it's a getSet parameter. So here what we are gonna do is simply assign some text to it. Another way to do this could be define a variable and then assign that variable to the text field of the component. It could be a local variable or a global variable if you want. But with this, we can modify the text through script. Here we enter in the play mode, and as you can see, the texts are modified. It means that we were able to write them through script. I hope you found this video useful, and see you next time. Cheers!